Good evening and welcome to The Journey Home. I'm Marcus Grodi, your host for this program. Now, I've said this many times. Every week I have this great privilege that EWTN gives me to bring into your homes the stories of men and women who were touched by the Holy Spirit, to have a deeper walk with Christ, and particularly to come home to His beautiful church. But I can certainly say this is one of those nights of a great privilege, because our guest tonight is someone that many of you are, if you don't recognize by sight, you probably recognize the tone of voice because of his singing. Collin Raye, former Southern Baptist, but you know him as a singer. So let me welcome you, Collin, to the Journey Home.
So good to be here. I'm a big fan of the show. I've been watching it for a long time.
It's great to have you here. And you know, a lot of people, they'll hear music, or they'll read books, and they'll hear the stories, but they say, boy, I'd love to know more about the person behind that song, behind that book.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of them don't know that the person behind that book or story is someone that's had a deeply moved journey that isn't all just, you know, God just gives me blessings over and over. Yes, He does, but sometimes there's challenge in the midst of that.
Yeah, well, I've always felt like, you know, part of being a Catholic is, and again, I'm a convert, so I was converted when I was 23. But part of being a Catholic is that realization and getting comfortable with the fact that we do understand suffering, and we not only accept it, but we see value in it. And that was a new concept for me, coming from a Baptist background. You know, where there's still there's a lot of people who in that world that believe that God's going to basically fix everything in your mortal life for you if you just have enough faith, and that sometimes so, but that's basically dissing the fact that there is suffering and there's a value in suffering, and that always made sense to me. That was one of the teachings of the church that appealed to me, because it made sense. Things have to make sense to me, or I can't accept it. And that makes sense.
I'd like us to get into that later, because I think that is a key for many of our folk, especially when you come from a non-Catholic background. You either just have no clue how to fit it into your journey, because from a Baptist standpoint, often the emphasis on saved at the end of life.
Right.
This life, it's kind of like get through it. You know,
right.
If you got tough things, well, it's really about the end, and you're guaranteed, so that's going to be better. Or if you're suffering in this life, there's something wrong with your faith. And there was a lot of that in the Southern Church. But let's get to that later.
Okay.
You know, you've seen the shows. You know what I try to do in the beginning is to invite you to take a long journey back and let the audience know where you came from spiritually as a young man.
Well, I grew up in the Bible Belt, and I was born in a small town called DeQueen in Arkansas, southwest Arkansas, and raised in a larger town, Texarkana, which is on the Texas-Arkansas border. And my family, I have a tremendous family. I was much closer to my mom's side of the family than my dad's. They're a very loving family, all Christian, and but primarily when I say Southern Baptist, that wasn't necessarily exclusive to that, because when you're in an area like that, a lot of times folks pick their church based on if they like the preacher or not.
Sure.
You know, and then a new preacher will come in, well, I don't like it, and then they like the guy for the Methodist church better, so now you're Methodist, you know. And the thing is I'm always quick to say that works for an awful lot of people, because at the end of the day, it is you have to have that relationship with Christ yourself, or you've got nothing, you know. But for me, I was always some of the things just didn't add up. And as you talked about, you know, the whole idea of the one time being saved and then you're good to go regardless and never worry about it anymore, I thought that just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, what if I did this? No one could really ever answer that question. So I was searching, and then when I was 18, I was always playing music. That's just what I did.
How'd that start?
Well, my mom was a singer, and she actually, back when she was 17, still before she got married, she and her sister, they were from a real country, very prim and proper family, just, you know, and they would sing at local churches. And Elvis, Johnny Cash, and the Sun Records bunch came through there in like 1957, and my mom and her sister got to sing open for this show on several, like I want to say 5 or 6 shows through the Arklatex area, they call it. And toward the last couple of shows, they actually got to sing with Elvis on stage. Whoa. And so she was real proud of that. But so anyway, music had been in my family always, and I never. My older brother is still a musician, and he was the guitar prodigy and whatever, and I didn't. It's just what we did, and that's just what my family did. And so when I did realize I could sing a little bit, and I learned to play guitar a little bit, and I could play bass a little bit, and thought, I think it seems like people like it when I do this. We always had support at home. from mom and dad. They both were like, hey, they're proud of us, as opposed to a lot of musicians have to go through the, when are you going to get a real job? You know, we never experienced that. So it was just a natural thing to do, and not to sound, because I was overly confident, but I knew I was good at it. I thought, I can do this. I can do this very well. So I'm going to pursue this. And it was never a desire to, I never had the whole thing, I want to be celebrity, I want to be famous. I just wanted to succeed at playing music and have people like what I did. And I got that. The whole star thing that came later was always a stumbling block for me. I never felt comfortable in that realm.
But the focus more on, you like the music.
Yeah, and again, much to the chagrin of many managers and record labels, because they want you to be they want you to love the celebrity of it. They want you to put that first. And I never could. I was a father already. My kids were everything to me. My faith in my kids, and so my career came after that, and that bothered a lot of people. And because of that, I didn't become as big a star as some of my contemporaries did. But I came to town, I always admired, as we were talking about earlier, I admired the people who, in whatever genre of music it was, that they were about the music and not about the perception and the image, you know. Yeah. You never saw Bob Dylan on The Tonight Show. You know what I mean, and so that's what I was drawn to, and so as a result of that, you know, when people would do there's a lot of that autograph line, put you on a pedestal thing that I just want to, can't I just go out there and mingle with everybody? Yeah. I would like that better than have people wait to meet me like I'm Santa Claus or something.
Sometimes the perception of a person who loves the music, in fact, loves the performing in the sense of sharing it and seeing the effect on the people, the folk in the audience will interpret that as, this person must be a great extrovert. Mm-hmm. It's not always the case.
No, not that case.
Sometimes the performer can be more of an introvert. I love the music, but I love sharing it. But, you know, the star person that the agents want is the one that's really into the show, into the connection. Yeah, and it's only maybe even secondarily the actual performance of the music itself.
Yeah, and I've known people in my industry, that contemporaries that came up around the time I did, and you can tell they just love that. They that's their identity. To me, it's all about identity. A person has to determine. I don't care what walk of life you're in. You have to look at them in the mirror someday and say, okay, what is my identity? Who am I? What am I? What do I stand for? What am I all about? And if the answer to that is, my self-importance is based upon how well I'm doing on the charts, or how many tickets I can sell, or how many records I'm selling, boy, look out, that's a dangerous place to go, because there's only so many Elvises, Michael Jacksons, Paul McCartneys. There's only so many people that are going to have that type of lasting, phenomenal superstardom. Everybody else is going to have their moment, and they're going to go back down. Mm-hmm. So what happens when you go down? If that's your self-identity, you're going to have some problems.
Yeah. Yeah. So in high school, you're already well into the music already then?
Oh yeah, in fact, I would go to school. You know, and play nightclubs back in those days. It was 9 to 2 in Texas. I mean, they didn't close them a minute before 2 o'clock. But I wanted to play so bad, and that was the way I was making a little money too. But for the most part, we were just dying to play. And a musician, when you're starting out, you'll play anywhere. If someone will let you sit up and play, you go there. That's just what you do. In fact, we don't have enough of that, I don't think, anymore. And in this American Idol society we're in now, where everybody thinks they can win a talent show and should get to be a pop icon or whatever. But I think there's something to be said for grinding it out and doing it the tough way, and that's how we learn to be good, you know. But I would do that and get home and get to bed at 3 o'clock, 3:30, and get up at 7 and go to school. And I had that kind of energy back then. And I did that through high school. And then, so as soon as I graduated, I knew exactly what I was doing. We already had a plan. I'd been in a band for years, and my brother and I were still together at that time, writing songs, and we took off. Wherever there was someone who would hire us to play, that's where we went.
Was your faith a constant thread during that whole period for you?
It saved me. I know that sounds cliche, because unlike a lot of singers that when they talk about their faith and it's saving them, it usually goes to some sort of addiction or something where they crashed and burned, and then the Lord saved them and brought them back. And I saw a lot of that in my circle of players that I was with. I was very blessed in that while I would tiptoe into things and indulge in little bitty things. It was always that handle. I've always felt that hand on my shoulders saying, what are you doing? And pulling me back. So I never really got into anything. I focused on my job. I said, I want to succeed at this. I want to stay focused on this. I don't want to get sidetracked into drinking or whatever was around. And of course, in that world, everything's around there. Yeah. And it eventually it would wind up in Nevada, working in the casinos where even more things are around. But the money was good, So I always treated it as a job. It's my profession, and that's all it is. And then when it was done, when I put my guitar away and the night was over, then I was who I was. And I think the one constant that kept me knowing my identity was my faith. I thought, well, I think we all need guidelines and we all need a standard to live up to. And if you ignore that standard and ignore those guidelines, God gave us the 10 Commandments not for His pleasure, for us. He said, if you do these things and don't do these things, the other thing. If you live like this, you'll be happier. I'm going to love you regardless. But I'm telling you, if you kill somebody, if you commit adultery, if you go around telling lies, it's going to cost you. Yeah. And it took me years to figure that out. And so many people look at the 10 Commandments and Christ's teachings, which were more specific, as, well, God is always pointing His finger at us, or they'll say, well, I've been a sinner for so long and I've been out of church, or He don't want me in there. No, He wants you in there more. He's more concerned about you because of that. He loves you so much, and it took me a long time to fully grasp that. Yeah. But they're for us. All that is for us.
In my early days, when I was involved with music, and in the middle of that, had my awakening to Jesus, two things really struck me, and I wonder if you went through the same thing. All of a sudden, I was re-examining the content of what I was singing. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Absolutely.
What's coming out of this mouth? Mm-hmm. The other thing that was a struggle was being in front of people. Who am I promoting? Is this about me or is this about my Lord? Mm-hmm. Talk about those two contexts in your own journey at this stage in your life. I mean, the content, was there a struggle between your faith and what you were singing in the places you were singing, and also about you being up in front? Were you struggling with that issue?
Both, yeah. I mean, it really did. But again, when you're young, you don't. How many of us used to sing Hotel California and never realized it was written about Anton LaVey's home, and we didn't care. Or Stairway to Heaven, some of the lines were. We just thought it was a cool song, and we never thought that deeply. I mean, we didn't think that anyone would, from the walk of life I came from, no one would ever thought someone would have written a song with satanic messages in it, so we just played them. Yeah. Then when I learned later on, I thought, well, I better stop doing that one. That's not cool. Yeah. But again, that music musically still shapes you, mm-hmm. but you start realizing I better pay attention to the lyric now. So by the time I'd kind of wrestled with all that, by the time I got my deal and hit it big, so to speak, but I knew what I wanted to do, and I've always been able to do lots of different styles of music and be versatile in that way, because I hate being a one-dimensional, one-trick pony. But lyrically, I said I'm going to do positive stuff, and after Love Me, my first big hit, it was #1 for 3 weeks, and it was a message. When was that?
What, approximately?
That was 91.
91, okay.
I was 8 years old.
For the audience purposes, so you're done.
I was 8 years old. No, it was 91. A little over 20 years ago, when it hit #1 and stayed #1 through January of '92, and I was off and running after that. But that song had a. I have to admit, when I cut it, I just knew it was a hit song. But I knew it fit the criteria of this is something that I'd be comfortable saying, because I didn't write it. So this is something I would be comfortable saying. And it was such a big hit that I realized, wow, I guess now in country music you can say things like this. You can talk about the afterlife. You can talk about faith. And it's okay. We can make hits out of it. So that put me on a mission to do that. In This Life came, in Little Rock, which was about a struggling alcoholic, finding God and getting, and all these songs were becoming hits. So I quickly thought, okay, God's given me this platform to do this. Now every once in a while, radio says, well, you got to give us an up-tempo ditty once in a while. We're going to. So we had a few of those too. But for the most part, everyone knew me as the guy that did serious songs, meaningful songs, and so.
Do you think you were really touching, though, a hunger in the audience?
I think so.
They're so used to 100 songs just like this, and all of a sudden here's one that really is speaking to where I'm at.
Well, that's what people would tell me, so I knew I was on the right track. And not just because they were hits, but that tells you people are calling in and wanting to hear them.
The reason they were hits is because they were hitting people.
Yeah, and it wasn't. And I was, like I said earlier, I wasn't an image guy. I wasn't wearing a hat. I wasn't the guy who looks like this or the guy who wears this. And images, and like I said, much to the chagrin of business people, because they want you to have that image. It's easier to sell, to this day, Dolly Parton, when most people around the world know who Dolly Parton is, but they don't think about those great songs she wrote. Yeah. They think about her, and so it's very, it's the shtick of it. And I never really was into that and wasn't interested in it. I'd have probably made a lot more money had I done that, but I just thought, God gave me this. He can take it away anytime he wants. So I'm going to try to honor him throughout that. Now, fast forward now to where I just did a full-blown hymns record of now that.
No, you mean?
Yeah, now that's what's out right now. Now I would have done that back then if I thought I could have, but it took me this long to get to where I could, at a point in my life where I say, look, I'm doing it. I'm not going to tiptoe around. Because when we were having the hits, it was my faith was definitely evident. People who knew me and people in the industry knew that's what I was all about. But you have to be cautious. Yeah. It's like political. You have to tiptoe and not be too over the top, or they'll resist you or whatever, and be subliminal, I should say. But what always would carry the day is the live show. And they could see my sincerity. I'm real passionate when I perform, and if I met people backstage or after the show or whatever, I reached out to them when that was easy. I was very accessible, and I think they would see that and go, well, he's real. He's who he appears to be.
Sometimes I've heard this from authors, that often the stuff they really wanted to write, they couldn't convince their publisher or whatever to write that. So they're writing other stuff with the trajectory of, so that someone will say, boy, I read that. What else does that guy have? And then they hear the other stuff. Oh, yeah. And one example comes to my mind is with Elvis. I mean, a lot of people didn't know his spiritual and religious side.
You cut a lot of
They're used to
like
Jailhouse Rock, but then listen, there's a lot of other stuff that he did that was a different side of Elvis that your average person didn't know.
And he was always trying to do more and more and more of that, But again, it's very hard to change the old leopard spots thing. It's very hard to change that once you're, like, I've never considered myself a mainstream country music guy. If you listen to my voice, I'm more, contemporary or pop sounding. But when I talk, I'm obviously country. You can tell by my voice. But you do what you have to do to get in. And I think of the Lord. I think of the miracles. Okay, a lot of people have misconstrued, I think, the miracles when they look back at all that. They go, well, he wants everyone to be healed all the time. It's like, no, he's not going to do that. He did that to identify himself and to get their attention. Because why were people throwing palm leaves in front of him on the Palm Sunday when he was going to Jerusalem? Because this man he'd raised Lazarus from the dead. He had healed the blind. So they knew this was the Messiah or something special. They might not know exactly who he was, but they knew this was a big deal. He got their attention. Had he just shown up and just started preaching, they wouldn't have paid as much attention. So it was easy. Obviously, he did that to identify who he was, and he gave the apostles the ability to do that, to identify that they were for real, that they were of God. And I always realized that. I never thought that it was just his intention is to, if you believe hard enough, you're going to be healed. Sickness is part of death.
In the southern belt down there were a lot of those kinds of preachers that were saying it's health and wealth. If you've got Jesus, then your life should be.
He's going to pay your rent for you. But it's not the case.
But suffering was one of the issues, right? That the Lord had used to kind of move you on.
Yeah, and I've had a lot of ups and downs. In fact, I'm writing my autobiography that we're going to have out in the fall. I can't believe anybody actually wanted me to do that, but I guess I have a good story. It's not going to be one of those music business tell-alls. I'm talking about my career, but for the most part, the reason I agreed to do it is because I do have a story that I think is motivational and healing to people about God, what God can do. I've had a lot of ups in my life. I've had a lot of downs. My wife, when I was very, very young, the mother of my kids, when Jake, my son, was born, Jacob in '85. Long story, but here she had a ulcer perforate in her stomach. No one knew it was there. She went into had to do an emergency C-section. He was born really dead for the most part, almost dead, blue. She went into cardiac arrest and stroke simultaneously. She was on the hospital for a year in a flatline coma for 9 weeks. Wow. We had Jacob baptized that very day within the hour because they said he's not going to live through the day.
Were you Catholic at this point?
Yeah, I had become Catholic. Right. I was married before I was Catholic. We were married. We had a Justice of the Peace ceremony. I didn't discover the church until 2 years later, and then, but my daughter Brittany, when she was born, we were already Catholics, and she actually entered the church the same day I did, as a baby, and so that was a really special thing. But then Jake came 2 years later, and this happened on Palm Sunday, which has always been a very big dramatic day in the life of my family. It seems like whenever something major happens, it's on Palm Sunday. But this happened, and so surviving that, and I was just a young father, had no medical insurance. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And all I knew is my life had just been ripped away from me. Had a little 2-year-old daughter at home. Like, where'd Mama go? So that was a huge thing. But it prepared me, as fate would have it, and as God would have it. They both were okay. And tons of brain damage, different things. Jake has cerebral palsy. You'd never know it to look at him now, though. He's very blessed in that regard. He appears totally healthy and normal. And Connie is still with us. She's ornery as ever, and you can tell something happened to her back when. It's aged her, but she's fine. Which is another side thing, which is why I got into the whole the fighting the euthanasia thing too, because when people say, well, they're unplug them, you go, well, I've seen it firsthand. Don't tell me, we don't know what God's going to do. We don't know what the human brain's going to do. So give them some, But anyway, that's another issue. But I think all of that prepared me for losing my granddaughter, which would come much, much, much later. Okay. But yeah, those things are they're crippling, and they can be crippling if you don't give it to Him. Right. And it's taken me. Life is a journey, and everybody's on a different part of their journey, a different time in their spiritual journey. And as I have grown older, it's not because of success and years that I've lived that has made me feel closer to God. Like I'm closer to the veil, so to speak. It's the tough stuff. It's going through the huge loss and realizing He's still propping me up, and He still wants me doing stuff. I was, because when Haley died, I was like, well, can I go too? I want to go with her because I don't want her to leave us. She says, no, you got more to do. And the fact that He still has me doing this, and it's an amazing transformation. But it takes being quiet and being still and allowing Him to do what He does. And that's easier said than done. It took me to 48, 49 years old to figure that out.
Well, I think I brought up the suffering issue, which I think is a key one for us to talk about, but I have a feeling I jumped us ahead a little bit because I got us in the Catholic Church already, and we haven't really talked about what even brought that to your mind back when you were already rising in terms of public recognition and your music, your writing, your singing, and your recording. Let me ask you first, growing up in the Southern Bible Belt, had you ever thought about the Catholic Church? Was that a part of your life at all?
It was like a bad word, right? And again, it's just there's so many misconceptions. Right. No one really thinks about See, I've always been a big history buff. I love the history. I want to know why things happen the way they did and where things came from. So, and I didn't learn that in school. I would learn that on my own. I would get books long before there was an internet. I would go get books and go, why is this the way it is? And I don't think there's many people that don't even realize our church has been here for 2,000 years. They think it's something that cropped up a few hundred years ago in Europe or something.
There's a lot of churches that's the way they were.
Yeah,
25 years ago.
But I remember we'd hear the song, "Give me that old time religion, give me that," and we would hear that. It was good enough for Paul. It was good enough for Silas. I was thinking, as I started to realize, well, the old time religion is the Catholics. It sounds like to me. It wasn't us. But so I would question those things. But I did have I was baptized when I was 12 years old, and went forward, as they say.
Yep. As an expression of your faith.
As an expression,
right.
Because looking back on that, I knew my mom was prodding me to do that, and I already had a relationship with Jesus. I loved him. I never questioned it. I knew it was true. I knew it was true because God always gave me a certain degree of discernment. And I could just tell if something was bogus or not, And I believed it. I totally believed it. I knew him. I knew he was in my life even as a child. So I thought, well, but Mama, nothing overwhelmed me. I didn't feel this Holy Spirit experience like you're supposed to. Well, go down anyway. So I went down and went through the process and got baptized. So basically, you're telling me now I'm saved. So if I never go back to church the rest of my life, and if I never pray the rest of my life, I'm going to heaven? Yeah. Really? And even as a 12, 13-year-old kid, I was like, really? Okay, well. So as time went by, and again, I'm not knocking, I don't want you to think because I'm not. That works for an awful lot of people.
Well, and you're grateful for the witness they gave to you in your life and brought you to Christ.
And because of my mom's teaching me the Bible when I was early, I know my Bible pretty well. We were talking about Dr. Scott Hunter. I don't know it like he does, but I have a good working knowledge of the Old and New Testament, and I'd learned to compare things to Scripture. Or it's not, let that be the acid test, the litmus test, So when I left home and we had moved to Oregon actually, simply because we got offered work up there, and we got up there, and because we were from Texas, people liked us more. So we started developing a following. Thought, and I loved Oregon. It's beautiful up there. It's just, and I'd always wanted to climb mountains and whatnot. So I thought this is a great place to be. So we all kind of moved lock, stock, and barrel. The whole band. We're living in Oregon, and but I wanted to go to church. I always felt the need to be in church. And what I had been used to just didn't seem like it was fulfilling enough for me. Not for everybody, but for me. And so I was on this mission to find something, find where I was. And I'd always been intrigued by Catholicism, but again, I'd heard, they worship statues. They think Mary's the Savior. Jesus had nothing to do with it, all this stuff. And you just go, really? But I would watch movies where the church was portrayed, and I go, that doesn't look like that's what they are. So again, I use my own mind. Yeah. I wouldn't just dope just because I'm never one of those that say, well, you should do this just because mom and dad did it. You go, well, maybe they were wrong. I love them to death, but maybe they were wrong. And then if I ask them, well, why do you believe this? Well, that's what my family did. Or why do you vote this way? Because that's what my daddy did. Well, did you ever think times may have changed? I use my own mind. I believe God gave you an intellect for a reason. Use it.
Well, part of the danger is because people will pass on things that they received and don't take the time to examine at all.
And we see that politically now too. We see it politically. People will vote a certain way, or they'll go along with something just because, well, that's what I always heard. I go, well, who'd you hear that from? I don't know, just everybody. That's just what they say. Who's they?
Yeah,
in other words, and I was always I want to find out, where are you getting this from? Tell me what exactly you're talking about, and I want to test it and see if it's true or not. Well, I was the same way with my faith. So there was this couple that became dear friends of mine and my godparents, Dick and Lil Ellingson in Portland, Oregon, and they used to come see us play in one of the nightclubs around there, and I became good friends with them, and Lil always had a crucifix on. And just from watching movies and Dracula movies and stuff, I knew that old crucifix, she must be Catholic, So I said, well, are you guys, and I started talking to them, and they said, yeah. I said, could I go to church with you sometime? They were like, yeah. So about a week later, I went, and with good, open-minded, and I knew, I already dispelled, I knew that the rumors, that's junk I'd heard when I was a kid was not true. But I had no idea what it was, what I was in for. It was a little parish called Our Lady of Sorrows in Portland, and I walked in. I know this sounds dramatic and cliche, but I felt this overwhelming presence of goodness and peace that I'd never felt anywhere, in any building, in any church, anywhere in my life. And I thought, okay, this is good. And I saw the reverence and people kneeling. I didn't know at that time about the tabernacle and the body of Christ. I didn't know what they were kneeling to, but they're very reverent. It's quiet. And I was used to churches being basically fellowship halls where everybody's talking, oh, brother so-and-so, oh, sister so-and-so. And all of a sudden there was a holiness, I guess. I felt a holiness in it. And I know other people have said, well, I didn't feel that when I first walked in. I don't think that's going to happen to everybody, but he wanted me in that church. God wanted me to walk in there. And by the time Mass was over, I had a ton of questions about what was that? Why did we do that? But I knew I want to come back.
You knew in there.
Oh yeah, I thought I have come home.
Let's pause right there because it's a good time. We need to take a break, but we'll come back to that in just a little bit because, often we're expecting the the reasonable, argumentative, apologetic interest in the church, but sometimes God jumps around that whole thing and just says, wait, I want to touch you and open your heart to the beauty of the church.
Amen.
We'll come back in a bit. We'll continue the story. See you in a bit.
I, the Lord of sea and sky, I have heard my people cry, all who dwell in dark and sin, my hand will save. I who made the stars of night, on the last day, yes, I will raise you up. Oh, I will raise you up. Yes, I will raise you up on the last day.
Welcome back to the Journey Home. I'm thoroughly enjoying our time tonight with Collin Raye, and it's giving you a chance to tell the backdrop to what people don't always know when they hear your songs. And as you mentioned, some of your music is really about the tough things in life, and it's drawing people to touch a heart, change a heart, not just have a good old time. I mean, there's nothing wrong. But I want to get back to your story. I've kind of cut you off. You just had this powerful experience of the Mass. I'm assuming that was your first Mass.
Yes.
As you sat there, I mean, it's obviously quite a bit different than any Baptist Methodist worship service you'd ever had before.
Yeah. Well, again, my knowledge was just very superficial as to what I'd learned through movies and just people, because I'd never been in a Catholic church before. I never really had a long talk with a Catholic before, and because it's very rare. The way the towns I'm from is like, okay, there's one Catholic church, and across town there's like a Mormon church, and then there's like 5 Presbyterian churches, 3 Methodist, and like 60 Baptist churches. So it's like, it's kind of like Salt Lake is Mormon in Salt Lake. Every other block you see an LDS church there, and so you just don't. It's just not none of your friends go. I mean, if you just don't have any connection with anybody like that. So it was all brand new to me. And in a way, I'm glad it was, because I had a clean palette, so to speak, or a clean canvas for God to paint on, and I was very open to it, because I thought, okay, there's a holiness here I've never felt before, so I'm open, teach me. And I became a very quick study after that. I mean, Lil will tell you, I didn't really argue, but I would check things biblically.
You had a list of questions.
Oh yeah, like basically, what was that prayer? What was he saying? It's like, why do we stand up? Why do we sit down? Why do we kneel down? And what are these things on the wall? The Stations of the Cross, and everything I learned, I liked. I thought why? Because it made Christian sense to me. Now, if it had been something kooky, I mean, I've had people approach me with, and I'd been approached by other faiths that are a little more kooky, maybe, or a little bit more off center, I should say, but I'd give them a chance. As long as it was Christian based, I would go, okay, come into my home. I've had to tell me about it, because this was prior to me joining our church. And I'd go, okay, sounds good. And then as it was going in, you start to get into some of the origins, and you go, oh, okay, now that cannot be true, and here's why. And they'd get up, because someone who maybe has just been taught that,
right?
And now you're challenging,
for a long time.
Challenging them on it. They don't have an answer for it. So I knew that didn't work for me. That wasn't right, as far as I could see. So in the Catholic Church, every bit of information I got, it made sense, and I gave it the litmus test with the Bible. Now, some of the things I wouldn't know where to look, but I know a lot of people hold to, as it Corinthians, one of the 2 Corinthian letters, where Paul says, you're saved by faith alone, not by works, and people take that as meaning, well, it doesn't matter what you do if you just believe in Him. You go, well, what is believe? But I never bought that. I was always saying, well, what does He mean by faith? Faith in Him, doesn't that also mean trying to live like Him, or just believing He existed? Yeah. In other words, just believing that He was the Son of God and He died for us, that shouldn't be enough.
Yeah, I think the verse that you're referring to, which the Ephesians 2 passage, that you're saved by grace through faith and not by works, lest you boast, in that whole context, really the context of that is not so much talking about salvation at the end of life anyway. It's talking about the fact that you were out there completely absorbed in a pagan world, and you were saved out of that into the body, not because of any works you did when you were in that pagan world.
Yeah.
God didn't reward you out of that pagan world into Christianity because you were so good back then. No, He pulled you out of that mess by grace.
Of course, it's all Him.
Yeah.
Of course it is. And someone will say, I've had people, they'll sit there and go, you can't go to heaven because of the Pope, or you can't go because of Jesus. Well, of course. Who's arguing with that? That's what I was going to say. Whoever claimed that, they go, "Oh, really?" No, of course it's through Christ. But we do have a responsibility to do our part and try to follow Him, and we can mess it up. I've had people tell me, I don't believe that. Once you're saved, you can't lose it. I'm saying, you're going to tell me that if I denounced Him, let's say I had a faith experience when I was 15, and I was saved, and you're telling me that when I'm 30, if I denounce Christ, that I'm still going to go to heaven? Yes. That's insane. He gave us free will. We definitely can mess it up if we want to. So to me, I absorbed everything, and it passed the sense test. It made sense to me, and I thought this sounds like, I think God wants me here, and I've never looked back. I've never one day in my life ever regretted my entry into the church. I'm thankful for it all the time.
At the time, were you essentially alone in the journey, or what about your band members, family, friends?
Well, Connie, my wife, would become a Catholic years later, but she was kind of resistant to it at the time. But she was supportive of me doing it, and because I spent a lot of time with Lil and Dick, and Lil was sort of really helped me with the catechism, and was a wonderful teacher. And then did the classes as well, but I had her, which really gave me a lot more time than maybe a lot of people get just getting to go to catechism classes. And so I just loved it. I loved it. I thought, why did I not know this before? But I was just really thankful that I had found it and raised my kids in the church, of course, and now my granddaughter.
What about the old band members, the gang?
They were supportive of me and everything, but again, I think everybody that I worked with at that time, mostly, I knew had believed.
Okay.
Were believers, but and one of them was lived it, but not everybody. And so, but they were not very respectful of me doing it. I think people could always see when I was passionate about something, I was very single-minded, and I think people would go, "Wow," and maybe it inspired people a little bit. I hope. But no, I was definitely alone on the journey.
I was wondering, if you had a band where they were all made up of flaming, on fire, Southern anti-Catholic sorts, you might have had battles the whole time.
Yeah, but no one was like that.
They needed to grow in their faith too. They needed to be a little bit more active in their faith.
Absolutely, no one. I didn't have any resistance of people like that, and if anything, people wanted to know, well, what do you like about it? So I got to witness a little here and there, and I would do it in the nightclubs too, because that's where I made my living at that time. That was long before we did concerts and stuff. I was playing still in nightclubs, nicer nightclubs, but still a nightclub is a nightclub. And everybody knew. I mean, I talked about it all the time, and I did adjust what I sang, and I wouldn't sing this. I thought, well, this kind of goes against what I'm all about, so I'm not going to do this one anymore. Yeah. But and so when people say, well, you can't play music in that world and be a Christian, that's not true. You totally can, and that's if Christ, when he walked the earth, he didn't stay in the synagogues.
There's a sense in which the Pharisees are making the same claims against Jesus. You're going to that home of that sinner.
Yeah, the tax collector.
Yeah, you're hanging with it. Well, he came to save the sinners and not the righteous. So the sense in which, if God's called you and given you the strength for that environment, I think that's the issue we got to be careful of. Is there are those, if I'm going into the bars, but it's like, wait a second, that there's a battle. You're taking on a lot of. Are you strengthened by that? Do you have the support network? Is that where God's calling you? So those are issues. For you, what about the usual stumbling blocks? Mary, statues. You said you had talked a bit about those. Going through your formation process in RCIA with your friends under the catechism. What about Mary? How did she fit into your journey?
Oh boy, I mean again, that was a whole new concept to me, because we weren't ever taught before that you could ask the Blessed Mother for help. I mean, we always honored her at Christmas. You know, she always gets some attention at Christmas, but the rest of the year, and so that never, as a Protestant, as a Baptist, as youth, the thought of that Catholics really like Mary a lot, that never bothered me, because to me it made sense. Yeah. And I thought, well, surely they're not saying she's that she's God or whatever. When we were hearing the fourth member of the Trinity, all that, I just knew better. I could just thought that's silly. So, but when I did start seeing her importance in the faith, and how, because I mean, if you just go to a mass, I heard Dr. Hahn talk about this too. For the first time he went to a mass, and it was all but Jesus, 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 from the get go to the end. It's Jesus Christ, Jesus. It's all, the whole mass is about the Lord, you know. Yeah. And like me, he had heard all these things. Well, it's not about Jesus. It's totally about Jesus. But as Lil was teaching me, and I also had a sister, Sheila Marie was her name, was a sweet nun who helped me, who taught the RCIA, and we talked about that a lot, and about the Blessed Mother. And I said, so when she said, no, you can ask, the Hail Mary is basically a prayer that's just one of many prayers that you can ask Mary for her divine intervention. And so I said, well, why can't I just go straight to Jesus? Well, of course you can. Of course you can, but the way she put it to me is like the wedding feast of Cana, you know, where there was a reason that story made it in the Gospels. Yeah. It wasn't just so that he made water into wine. They mentioned the fact that he didn't want to. He didn't want to, and his mother asked him to. Said, would you do something? And he even admonished her. Said, woman, don't you know my time has not yet come? Why do you bother me? But he did it because his mom asked him to. And that's one of my favorite stories in the Bible, because it's such a beautiful, sweet truth and proof that he was a human being too. He was God, but he was also a human being. He was Mary's son, and that's something that's something you really have to dwell on and comprehend. That's something I enjoy thinking about sometimes. In the Mel Gibson movie, The Passion of the Christ, I thought one of my favorite things that Mel Gibson made sure he included in that film was that human relationship between Mary and her son, her baby, her only baby, and the incredible what that must have been like to know why this is happening to him, that he's choosing to do this, he's allowing this to happen to him, but I'm also still his mom, and that's my baby, and I have to sit there and witness that. That's an amazing thing. So I've learning that was a nice bonus to know that she's here for us too. And I said, where in the Bible is it? Well, he's on the cross, one of the last things he says, and I go, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Otherwise, because people would say, well, he's just basically telling John to look after his mom after he goes. You go, why would that make it in the Scripture? You know, everything on those last few words on the cross is again, I got a lot of this from Dr. Scott Hahn, listening to him. Everything that was said that made it into Scripture was highly significant, or it wouldn't have been there. It wouldn't have been included.
There's so many stories, as John says himself in his gospel. Yeah. So why this one or that one?
It's all there for a reason.
Another, well, there's so many that I could think of, that Catholic things that are different than your Baptist background. A confession.
Oh, see, again, made perfect sense to me. And what I'd always heard as a kid was you don't need a man to confess your sins to men. You can go to God. I said, well, I've always done that. You pray, and you're going to do that regardless. You still ask the Lord in prayer to forgive you. But I thought, why is that so weird? And when it was explained to me, well, the priest is there speaking on behalf of God, and he's going to give you absolution, where you're absolutely sure that you're forgiven. And where's that in the Bible? Boom, right there. Peter, you are the rock upon which I will build my church. To you I give the power to forgive sins. What you loose on earth will be loosed in it. I go, well, there you go. How did we miss that one? It's very obvious and plain. You know, that he anointed the church with his own power and with authority. And I think that's a big word to me, that and I see the effects of it in the history of our church, where there is an authority there that's never left. He gave it to us 2,000 years ago, and it's still here. And people will counter with, anti-Catholic people, so will counter, well, the Inquisition. Well, first of all, there's an awful lot of misconceptions if you look at it, the truth historically. But has certain popes over the centuries made mistakes? Well, of course, they're human beings. But it didn't last very long. You always notice that the church fixes itself It's a sort of a self-healing entity that after a little while goes by, it gets fixed. You know, St. Francis came to fix, you know, and to me, that's why the
because the
authorities.
church has people in it, like you and
It's
me.
human
So sometimes we
beings.
make mistakes, and then there has to be a time of.
Yeah, and God fixes that for us. He fixes it and repairs it.
With that same theme in mind, in your own self, as you become Catholic, and then you've been a Catholic for a couple years.
Oh, well, I was 23 and I'm
Okay.
51 now.
All right.
Quite a
So,
while.
what would you say in your own life has been the biggest effects of being a Catholic that's made a difference in your own person, your own understanding of who you are and what you do?
I think it was St. Augustine that said there were three. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was St. Augustine that's attributed with the like, there's three attributes every Christian must have: humility, humility, and humility. and I think it's a church of humility. It's a church about giving up oneself. That's why we kneel. You know, we're the first people I'd ever seen kneeling. You know, in other words, God is bigger than me. It's all about Him. It's not about me. And I think many of the times in my life where I've been cut down to size, so to speak, was because I was getting a little too big for my britches, you know, and God was humbling me and bringing me back down. It's important to Him that we approach Him humbly. I don't think you can't approach God with a proud heart. He's still listening, but by the pride is a sin in itself, and you build this. You're putting a wall between you and Him to where He can't operate. He can't act in your life the way you need Him to because of your pride. And I think the humility that is taught and the way we practice our faith, it's all about humility. The fact that the celebrant of the Mass is the last one who walks in. I notice things like that right off the bat, and you go, instead of the first one. You know, He's the last one who comes in. It's the servant. You know, it goes back to Christ washing the disciples' feet. It's about service and humility. That was a new concept to me that has changed my life and made me realize that's what it is to be a Christian, is being the servant of everyone.
I think especially in what you do.
Oh, yeah.
The key of, as Paul very often talks about the importance of thanksgiving. In other words, thanking God for the recognition that everything you've got is a gift.
Everything.
The ability to sing, the ability to write, the ability to get in front of people, all the things. If you're seeing that from the standpoint of man ain't I good, then that's going to have one trajectory in what you're going to do versus, Lord, but for the grace of God. Everything I have is a gift of.
And really, I think that was how the Catholicism part of me is what kept me, because I would struggle with that, but especially in my heyday when things were really going great. I started to get very competitive. Why didn't I win that award? I'm better than that guy. You know, he can't do what I do. I knew there's a difference between conceit, arrogance, and confidence in what you do. You know, you can be very humble and still be very confident athlete or singer. I mean, I know what I can do, and I know I never worry about what's going to happen when I go on stage. I know I'm going to do well.
Well, true humility isn't the other extreme of saying, no, that music's lousy that I'm doing. I'm really bad at this. No, I'm terrible. No, that's not humility.
Yeah.
Humility involves recognizing I've been given a gift.
And it's not of me.
It's not of me.
It's not of me.
This is a gift that I'm now called to do for His glory. And not mine.
So when I talk about when I'm talking about, I knew I had a great voice, I knew I was singing really well. I know that today I could walk out and inhale some fumes or something, and it's gone. I could have no voice. I could not sing a lick tomorrow, and that's my calling card. That's the only gun I draw, so to speak, is that. And so without that, I've got nothing. I've got no livelihood, and not just a livelihood. It's been my way into other things in my life, is because I can sing. And that when I do that, people may not know about, well, I'm not sure what this guy's going to, and then I start singing, and the show's over, and then they're like, oh, you were great. And then it's a door opener, And without that, He could take it away just like that. And the fact that my voice hasn't changed, and most singers do, most men as they get older, their voice gets deeper, or they don't have the pitch, they don't have the ears. I physically don't look the same as I used to, but the voice is exactly the same as it was. And that's a God. That's a
thank you, Lord.
Yeah,
that's
totally.
what that is.
And He could take it away anytime.
Something we've heard recently, especially the athletes and others who have expressed their faith publicly, and one recently, particularly that audience I'm sure would know if I mentioned his name, but talks about the fact that whether you like it or not, you are a role model. Mm-hmm. If you are, you're in the public eye because of the gifts you've been given, and that door's been open for you. Whether you like it or not, you're a role model. You're either a good one or a bad one. You're a role model. Struggling with that yourself?
Yeah, well, I've always accepted that because the only part that was hard for me to accept is, like I said, I've never been comfortable with the whole I'm a star thing. That's just like it's embarrassing to me when you're put on such a pedestal.
Because of how the industry understands it versus how you're called.
There he is, and you go, I'm just a guy that sings songs, But there's always that. They're always trying to push you into to behaving that way and being comfortable in that environment. And so I struggle with that part of it, but never with the role model part. I always welcomed that because I had seen plenty of bad role models, and I had plenty of heroes, like every young boy. Usually they were sports heroes, sometimes in music. Roger Staubach to me was him and Tom Landry were two of my biggest heroes growing up in North Texas. And the way they lived their life and what they did on the field, the way they went about their business. But I remember seeing Tom Landry. After they lost one of the Super Bowls, they lost to Pittsburgh, and Dick Stockton, whoever's in the locker room, coach, I know this must be a very difficult time for you. He's like, well, no, it wasn't. We just lost a football game. He was like, we did our best. The Steelers were better, and he wasn't the slightest bit dejected. But now in our society, we hear so much of that, especially about sports. It was a tragedy. It's like, because somebody lost a game, it's true in a tragedy. It's just a sporting event. But it's so much importance is put on it that it's just bigger than life. Well, I'm getting sidetracked. But to me, it meant something to me that people come up to me now and say, "We named our son after you." I hear that hundreds of times. I've heard that, and they just go, "Really?" And I'll say, well, just because you like the name Collin and you didn't hear it a lot, they go, well, yeah, but we just like what you're all about. And guys, that's humbling to me. You just want to go, I'm not worthy. If I'm sitting in line and there's 100 people in line waiting to meet me, I just feel so bad because I just want to stand up on the table and go, folks, it's not worth it. Don't wait but they stay. And I don't understand why anybody would want to wait in line for an hour to talk to me, but they do, and I just accept that's part of it.
Even that's saying, okay, Lord, this is the role you've called me to live, and how can I use this as a witness for these people that are standing in line? They may not understand what it's all about, but it really needs to be about you somehow, and Scripture calls us to acknowledge Him in all we do. Yeah. That's what it's, acknowledging Him in all we do. We do have an email. Let's see if we can get one in here real quickly. We've got just a couple minutes. Paul from Oklahoma writes, my nephew is a gifted musician and is working hard to make it in the music business. Could Collin give him some advice for how he should keep the right perspective and balance between developing his talent and keeping his faith? Wow,
that's a great question. And my advice would be to you have to put the faith first. And if he is a believer and he has a relationship with God, that rules everything else. And look at your talent and your ability as a job. That's what I've always done. It's just my job. It's not. That's just what I do. It sounds cliche, but don't, again, like I said earlier, don't be defined by that and say, well, my self-worth is going to be based on whether I succeed or get a record deal or not. Because it's really not. And the thing is what I tell young people all the time, it's a dirty business. It's not a good, clean business. So if you're going to enter into that, but plenty of people of faith, well, I'm sure the NFL's not, and look at Tim Tebow, so you can still, you make it fit you, don't fit it. Because in the music business, the more success you find on whatever level you're at, there's going to be more junk that comes with it. And you're going to see more shenanigans, more behind the back, people stabbing each other in the back, climbing over each other, acting like they're your friend as long as they can use you for something, and then they don't know who you are as soon as the value of your value is over with. And that's disheartening. So just don't put any merit in that. And do it because you love to play your instrument, you love to sing, whatever it is you do. Do it because you love that. And let God, God's not going to open the door for you. You still have to, you still have to drive the car to get there. You still have to put forth the effort to get there. But if you're doing all that, and the door is not opening the way you want, it's because God doesn't want it open yet for you. He's not ready for that. Maybe he'll never be. He may see things ahead for you that's going to eat you up and spit you out. He doesn't want that to happen to you. Or he may go, you know what? This young man or this young woman is strong enough to handle this, and I'm going to use them as a witness, so I'm going to let it happen. But I think the key is just is not letting that overcome you, and do it because you love the music, and not just, you know, my favorite thing in American Idol when they're like, my daughter watches that, so sometimes I'll watch it, you know, and when they're interviewing the auditioners, you know, and they'll say, why do you think you're the next American Idol? Because I really want this, because I want to be the next pop icon. You go, I can't imagine one of the Beatles back in the day going, I just want to be a pop icon. You got to love the music, you know.
Collin, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I wish I had time for your music.
Oh,
CollinRaye.com.
CollinRaye.com.
New album's name?
His Love Remains.
All right.
Thank you so
Thank
very,
you,
very
Collin.
much.
God bless.
God bless you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode. See you again soon.